Welcome back, listeners, to Sandman Stories Presents, a folklore podcast where I read you to sleep or until the next story. I'm your host, Dustin. Today we are back in the book of Sioux folklore, written down by Charles Eastman. In the first story, we learn why nobody likes a braggart. And in the second story, we learn why you shouldn't go sticking your hands in cracks after midnight. Okay, let's begin. The fifth evening. The Falcon and the Duck. The boaster is a well-known character in every Indian village, and it is quite plain from the number of stories warning us against self-praise that the wise men of the tribe have not been slow to discover and point out this weakness of their people. The stories told by Smoky Day are seldom without a moral, and we may be sure that the children are not sent to him only to be entertained, but also to learn and profit from the stored up wisdom of the past. Moreover, they are expected afterwards to repeat the tales in the family circle, and there is much rivalry among the little folks as to who shall tell them the best. Tiona has a good memory and ready wit, and his versions are commonly received with approval. But it happens that little Tanagela, his cousin, has just won a triumph by her sprightly way of telling the fourth evening's tale of the 7 warriors. The little maid listens tonight with burning cheeks and shining eyes, eager to repeat her success with the pretty story of the Falcon and the Duck. The wintry winds had already begun to whistle, and the waves to rise, when the drake and his mate gathered their half-grown brood together on the shores of their far northern lake. "Wife," he said, "it is now time to take the children southward, to the warm countries, which they have never yet seen." Very early the next morning they set out on their long journey, forming a great V against the sky in their flight. The mother led her flock, and the father brought up the rear, keeping a sharp lookout for stragglers. All day they flew high in the keen air, over wide prairies and great forests of northern pine, until toward the evening they saw below them a chain of lakes, glittering like a string of dark blue stones. Swinging around in a half circle, they dropped lower and lower, ready to alight and rest upon the smooth surface of the nearest lake. Suddenly, their leader heard a whizzing sound, like that of a bullet as it cuts the air, and she quickly gave warning, "Honk! Danger! Honk! Honk! Danger! Danger!" All descended in dizzy spirals, but as the great falcon swooped toward them with an upraised wing, the ducklings scattered wildly hither and thither. The old drake came last, and it was he who was struck. "Honk! Honk!" cried all the ducks in terror, and for a minute the air was full of soft downy feathers like flakes of snow. But the force of the blow was lost upon the well-cushioned body of the drake. He soon got over his fright and went very southward with his family, while the falcon dropped heavily to the water's edge with a broken wing. There he stayed and hunted mice as best he could from day to day, sleeping at night in a hollow log to be out of the way of the fox and the weasel. All the wit he had was not enough to keep himself alive through the long, hard winter. Toward spring, however, the falcon's wing had healed, and he could fly a little, though feebly. The sun rose higher and higher in the blue heavens, and the ducks began to return to their cool northern home. Every day a flock or two flew over the lake, but the falcon dared not charge upon the flocks, much as he wished to do so. He was weak with hunger and afraid to trust the strength of the broken wing. One fine day a chattering flock of mallards alighted quite near him, cooling their glossy breasts upon the gentle rippling wave. "Here, children," boasted an old drake, "is the very spot where your father was charged upon last autumn by a cruel falcon. I can tell you that it took all my skill and quickness in dodging to save my life. Best of all, our fierce enemy dropped to the ground with a broken wing. Doubtless, he is long since dead of starvation, or else a fox or a mink has made a meal of the wicked creature." By these words the falcon knew his old enemy, and his courage returned. "Nevertheless, I am still here," he exclaimed, and darted like a flash upon the unsuspecting old drake, who was resting and telling of his exploit and narrow escape with the greatest pride and satisfaction. "Honk, honk!" screamed all the other ducks, and they scattered and whirled upward like dead leaves in the autumn. But the falcon with a sure aim selected the old drake and gave swift chase. Round and round in dizzying spirals they swung together, till with a quick spurt the falcon struck the shining outstretched neck of the drake and snapped it with one powerful blow of his reunited wing. The moral is, do not brag too soon, nor is it wise to tell of your brave deeds within earshot of your enemy. The end. Okay, and story number 2, The Sixth Evening, The Raccoon and the Bee Tree. "Ho, Chatana," said the old storyteller pleasantly. "I see that you have brought along Mato, the bear, with you tonight. I hope he will be good and not disturb the other scholars." "Grandfather," says Chatana earnestly, "he will be good. He obeys me and is never troublesome like some pets. He will lie quietly here by me and listen to the story." All the children arranged themselves around the brightly burning fire, the little boys sitting cross-legged, and the little girls sideways like demure little women. Although they do not know it yet, there is a special treat in store for them all this evening. The story is one in which feasting plays a part, and whenever good things to eat come into a story, it is a pleasant custom of the Sioux to offer some delicacies. The good old wife of the teacher has prepared a kettle full of her choicest wild rice, dark in color, but of a flavor to be remembered, and a generous dish of boiled rice sprinkled with maple sugar is passed to each child, and doubtless shared with Mato by his loving friend at the close of the story about the Raccoon and the Bee Tree. The raccoon had been asleep all day in the snug hollow of a tree. The dusk was coming on when he awoke, stretched himself once or twice, and jumping down from the top of a tall dead stump in which he made his home, set out to look for his supper. In the midst of the woods there was a lake, and all along the lake shore there rang out the alarm cries of the water people as the raccoon came nearer and nearer. First the swan gave a scream of warning, the crane repeated the cry, and from the very middle of the lake the loon, swimming low, took it up and echoed it back over the still water. The raccoon sped merrily on, and finding no unwary bird that he could seize, he picked up a few mussel shells from the beach, cracked them neatly, and ate the sweet meat. A little further on, as he was leaping here and there through the long, tangled meadow grass, he landed with all 4 feet on a family of skunks, father, mother, and 12 little ones, who were curled up sound asleep in a soft bed of broken dry grass. "Huh!" exclaimed the father. "What do you mean by this, huh?" And he stood looking at him defiantly. "Oh, excuse me, begged the raccoon. "I am very sorry. I didn't mean to do it. I was just running along, and I did not see you at all." "Better be careful where you step next time," grumbled the skunk, and the raccoon was glad to hurry on. Running up a tall tree, he came to 2 red squirrels in one nest, but before he could get his paws upon one of them, they were scolding angrily from the topmost bough. "Come down, friends," called the raccoon. "What are you doing up there? Why, I wouldn't harm you for anything." "Ah, you can't fool us," chattered the squirrels, and the raccoon went on. Deep in the woods at last he found a great hollow tree which attracted him by a peculiar sweet smell. He sniffed and went around and around till he saw something trickling down a narrow crevice. He tasted it, and it was deliciously sweet. He ran up the tree and down again, and at last found an opening into which he could thrust his paw. He brought it out covered with honey. Now the raccoon was happy. He ate and scooped and scooped and ate the golden, trickling honey with both forepaws till his pretty pointed face was daubed all over. Suddenly, he tried to get a paw into his ear. Something hurt him terribly just then, and the next minute his sensitive nose was frightfully stung. He rubbed his face with both sticky paws. The sharp stings came thicker and faster, and he wildly clawed the air. At last, he forgot to hold on to the branch any longer, and with a screech he tumbled to the ground. There he rolled and rolled on the dead leaves, till he was covered with leaves from head to foot, for they stuck to his fine sticky fur, and most of all, they covered his eyes and his striped face. Mad with fright and pain, he dashed through the forest, calling to someone of his own kind to come to his aid. The moon was now bright, and many of the woods people were abroad. A second raccoon heard the call and went to meet it, but when he saw the frightful object plastered with dry leaves racing madly toward him, he turned away and ran for his life, for he did not know what this thing might be. The raccoon who had been stealing honey earlier ran after him as fast as he could, hoping to overtake and beg the other one to help him get rid of his leaves. So they ran and ran out of the woods onto the shining white beach around the lake. Here a fox met them, but after one look at the queer object which was chasing the frightened raccoon, he too turned and ran at his best speed. Presently a young bear came loping out of the woods, and sat upon his haunches to see them go by. When he got a good look at the raccoon who was plastered with dead leaves, he scrambled up a tree to get out of the way. By this time the poor raccoon was so frantic that he scarcely knew what he was doing. He ran up the tree after the bear and got a hold of his tail. "Ooh, ooh," snarled the bear, and the raccoon let go. He was tired out and dreadfully ashamed. Now he did what he ought to have done at the very first. He jumped into the lake and washed off most of the leaves. Then he got back to his hollow tree and curled himself up, and licked his soft fur till he had licked himself clean, and then he went to sleep. The moral is, the midnight hunter steals at his own risk. The end. Well, those were some fun stories. I really liked the first story, how the falcon was able to get his meal. And in the second story, I really enjoyed the misadventures of the raccoon. I loved him stepping on the skunk family and all that other stuff. It was quite a bit of fun. And I look forward to telling more of these stories. Again, we're only on the 6th night out of 27, so we've got quite a ways to go. And the podcast shout-out is to Old Bones. Andy Earnshaw is a student making episodes about archaeology. He explains how archaeologists think and how they interpret what they dig up. He's covered Sutton Hoo, the Red Lady of Paviland, and a host of other digs. He does a great job of explaining things to us common folk. He hasn't had an episode recently, but he does have plenty of episodes that you can like, rate, and review. And the listener shout-out is to Dakar, Senegal. It was founded by the Lebu people, who still live there to this day. They speak a branch of Wolof called Lebu Wolof, which is not intelligible to Wolof speakers. It is located on the Green Cape, or as the Portuguese call it, Cabo Verde. They came into contact with the Portuguese and the Dutch, who set up a settlement to partake in the trade of enslaved people. Then the French joined in and took a portion of the land from the Jollof Empire. Despite slavery being outlawed in the French Empire, it continued in Dakar for another 33 years. The city became more important with the building of the Dakar-Bamako train line. It became the capital of an independent Senegal in 1960. It still serves as a base for French armed forces. I do hope to visit Dakar, as it seems like a beautiful place with lots of history. And so to my listener in Dakar, I say, Jerejef Akudi Gunich. Thank you, and good night.